wilds of Glastonbury Festival, and I've just asked him to just share a bit of his heart for sort of outward looking and what he feels like God is saying to the church at the moment. So, Jesus, we just commit your servant Sam to you. Thank you for his brilliant heart of generosity and his quick thinking and his intelligent sort of perspective on the world. And we just pray now that you'd anoint him with your power and your clarity and wisdom as he speaks to us, and help us to hear well. Amen.
So, as is probably wise, I'm going to start with an apology. Because Claire sent me through a list of things she'd like me to speak on. And I don't think coincidentally, they were the very issues that I was wrestling with. And I'm apologising because I have no mastery over any of these questions. And so all I'm going to be able to bring you is like the contents of my thoughts tipped out. And I'm applying it to myself. This is the thought process that I'm going through with these issues. And if it applies to you, then take it. If it doesn't, then leave it. But I think it's the most honest thing that I can do at this moment. I'm pretty ragged, in all honesty. I just find all this week I've been getting up for an hour or so and then wanted to go back to sleep for a couple of hours and up, even today. But as Claire said, I just come back from Glastonbury. Nick, can you put that first picture up?
I'm just multitasking.
Multitasking. That, I don't know if you can see, is all those little spots are people. That's the stage that I stage manage. And it's multitudes and multitudes and multitudes of people. And I've been, I think somebody called Calvin Harris was playing at that moment. And I spent the whole week with multitudes and multitudes of people. And I think of Joel saying multitudes and multitudes in the Valley of Decision. And this week I spent no time talking to anybody about anything of value, i.e. the life of Christ. That all these people can have a relationship with God. And they're flocking and pressing in to see a man play electronic music and gizmos and lights. And so the questions that Claire sent through to me are, how do we get people to see God? Is faith relevant? How do we keep outward? And what now in this hour? And I think, it's all going to come back to the same thing, and actually mirrors exactly what Lewis was saying, the point that I was going to end up labouring on, is how do we get people to see God? And of course we've got no other way than displaying God in our own lives. And why I didn't speak to anybody over that weekend was because my mind was full of things, full of responsibility, dates and actions and things I must do and things I must achieve and things I must manage. And so I was completely chock-a-block with things. And so there wasn't room for anything else. And I talked and I examined my own life. And I asked myself, well, how many things occupy me, juxtaposed to a life with God? And I occupy myself with a business that I'm starting is doing very well. And the daily things you can't, I have an ill son who it requires patience and time and what have you. It is just sort of part of it. But all these things take me and take me and take me. And then what do I do with my spare time? I watch YouTube. And sometimes I watch sermons on YouTube. And sometimes I go to bed at night and I'll put the Bible playing. But I'll do almost anything rather than listen and just spend that time with God. And that time with God, no other, no one else, is the only source of nourishment that I have. And I'm very good at diverting away from it. So I'm here and I'm looking and I'm thinking, well, what am I producing? What am I producing at the moment? And I have no condemnation from God. I know of his love. I know of his faithfulness. I know of his goodness. And this is a conversation I have with somebody who adores me. But the question always comes back, there is much, much more. There's much, much more. There's much, much more. And what I get now, I mean, I get the image of you know, when you have those, sometimes it's in movies or something or whatever, where £20 notes are all blowing down the street. All these people. And I'm texting, and maybe I'll catch one in the corner of my hand, and I'll but I'm not dropping the phone and picking up. And the only source I can put down to that I don't have that burning in me. I have had, it comes sometimes, but I don't have it burning in me. I don't have the heart of God burning in me. And as my life progresses, I don't have anything else. There's nothing else going on the planet. Nothing else for us humans to do once we know why we're here and what our purpose is, other than to engender that love, that relationship with our Father, with our parent, in whose image we're made, to be shaped and grown and set free. So how do we show people God? We show people God by being transformed, and we are transformed by the time that we give. And that, I mean, it covers, is faith relevant? And it comes down to, back to that original point, once you've discovered the purpose of being on the planet, and the purpose of being on the planet is to be transformed into the likeness of Christ. I mean, I talked a while ago about being like a fertilized egg. It's being transformed. Then there's nothing else, not is it relevant. There's no other reason to be here. Multitudes and multitudes and multitudes. Everyone with the potential to be as God. To be a new Christ. To be an individual, brilliantly unique Christ. As we are. And here we are in a position of extraordinary privilege. Extraordinary honour. And I'm not burning. And I'm going to end up lasting through this. So I think, so how do we keep outward? And I suppose how do we burn? And then I have to look at the restrictions that I'm playing on my life. And then Lewis just fed in brilliantly to this. And I have a habit. Let me just tell you my life to put it into perspective. Nick, could you use the second photograph? And this isn't to boast. This is to boast in Christ. This was Glastonbury 35 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
That's a horse.
And I used to travel with horses. This is our camp. And a great life, really lawless, shockingly badly behaved. But a lot of fun. We used to just travel around and cause mayhem. Very lawless, very anarchic. And then we'll switch back. We'll get distracted by the horses. But then God came into my life, and I had to make this decision. Do I carry on this sheer anarchy? Or, do I give my life? And I had such a clear image of what was going to happen to me. I had such a clear image of wearing pastel shirts and a Bible, and even my teeth would start protruding out so I could eat an apple through a tennis racket, It's absolutely what was going to happen when I gave my life to God. And so I said, yes, God, I will follow you. And the two things I asked, one, that I don't have to do rubbishy jobs for money. That if I'm following you, then that's your responsibility. This was all outside of the context of the church. I didn't go near a church. I didn't know. I just decided they didn't. I didn't know that people knew God. I thought I was alone in this, but it was real. reading the Bible for the first time in context of having the Holy Spirit in you and reading Acts, and they shared and they gave it just blew my mind. But pleased that I don't have to do nonsense jobs to make money, things I don't enjoy and what have you. And two, please can it not be boring? And God in his faithfulness, I met lovely Kate, who had been married for a long time, but then we went to Africa, to the deserts of northern Niger, where the Tuareg tribesmen are nomadic. They wear the blue turban, cover their face, extraordinary people, swords, no technology, hadn't seen a vehicle some places we went to. And we'd go up into the bush and park the Land Rover and say we need water for it, and they'd bring a bowl and put it in front of the Land Rover for it to drink. It was that sort of, kept slaves. It was a different world, but fascinating. Thank you, God. And okay, we went there with the gospel and we did see people saved. But in all honesty, it was exciting, and I was a man of that age who liked excitement. And it doesn't put anything down. God uses what he wants. And then we came back to the UK, and from that, then I went into immediate disaster relief. So for Tear Fund initially, and then Save the Children, where you're getting flown into first places. So wars and famines and earthquakes and everything. And I love that. Thank God for that. And then from there, it changed. I actually got very, very, very burnt out. And I said to God, look, I've seen the mountains and the deserts and jungles and everything. And I've been everywhere, thank you. I haven't seen the oceans. And then I got a job as a scientific observer aboard ships that are fishing in the very, very remote oceans. So down to Antarctica, to the Grand Banks, across the Indian Ocean and everything, many times. And thank you, God, for that. Now I'm a stage manager for that. And that tours the world. We go, or have been until COVID. I think the point of that is not to boast, and I'm not. It's to know the life that we can have. And one thing that I must stop myself from doing, and I do it, and I'm doing it now, and I need to stop, is to project my future in a manageable bite size. And I think many, many, many of us do this. That we have a self-image that might not be that great. I'm referencing back to Lewis here. And from that not great self-image, we project the best that we think that we can hope for or achieve. And it's terribly restricting. It's based on your view of yourself, not God's view of you. And I compare it to being, and this is what happens, I compare it to being in a square room doing something at a computer. And I know that when I walk out of that square room, I'll go into a corridor with known doors off the side. And I'll walk down known steps onto a street. And that's my life and my living and my expectations. And all the while I'm doing that, there's someone throwing stones at the window. And if I go to the window and be that little bit unconventional with my expectations, there's someone outside calling you to come climb out the window. Never climbed out the window. Climb out. It's a beautiful, warm, moonlit night. Come out, come out, come out, come out. You don't need shoes, just run in the grass. Come, we'll go down to the stream. We'll watch the salmon running, hear the owls. And there's this amazing light outside the window. And we're always going through the door and our little expectations. And when I think of Laodicea, neither hot nor cold, and I think of mediocrity, and I think anything but mediocrity, anything but a small image of ourselves and a small image of our future. And we have this extraordinary thing inside us, and we have God's image of us which we're not accessing, and the life we're not accessing. And it's not, if you have a career and a calling, then you're called into that, and that's right. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, that our little mediocre expectations of what the future we are going to allow ourselves. And I think it's a very vulnerable It's just a compromised place to be. We make ourselves small and we make God small. But what happens with me in this room on this computer, I ignore all that stone and sometimes it irritates me and I draw the curtains to carry on in my expectation, asking God to come into where I am, to make it easier and make it more comfortable and maybe a sofa, rather than, well, barefoot in the street, which might be uncomfortable, it might be strange, it might be a different sensory, it might be outside your expectations. But it's life, it's life, it's life. He comes to bring life. And I think, and you can find scriptures relevant to this all the way through, they pop up, I'll bring them. So when we can get outward with our own lives and free ourselves from our own mediocrity, then suddenly, possibly, we start being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, having the right conversation. That coincidences just seem to happen all the time, that we live in a state where it's not necessarily sparks flying out of everything, but we're in synchronicity. And because we've broken out of our pre-programmed railway tracks. And I think if we are going to impact the multitudes, then it's going to be with something really to display. Really to display. And the thing is, what pleasure. What extraordinary pleasure. I mean, I think of Flo. And when I first got to know Flo, she had ambitions for, and they were good, and they were usual of someone of her age and her situation. But now she's blown out the window. That the Ukraine thing is just completely, now her vision's altered beyond. And it sacrificed her small dreams. They went to the side. They got blown out. They got blown out the water. And I think that is the point of it. That if we dare to say, yeah, okay, I'll go. And we have to know it from God. We can't self-generate. And generally we do self-generate with a slightly low opinion. We'll always come up with something which is rather difficult and unpleasant and not very enjoyable. As if it's somehow a penance or something, it must be God because it's unpleasant. But we just flower. We just flower. That's the word of the road. Bloom wild. At home. And it just jumped out of me, those words. And so it comes down to, and this really does hit it. Well, how about this hour? The time that we're living in. And it's not prophecy, it's not anything. But I think we live in extraordinarily dark times. And if I'm honest with you, I don't see the future looking terribly good for the planet and the countries and that higher level, those structures. Really, I mean, I'm grey beard. I remember when I was young, where the government sent every household a leaflet for what to do when nuclear weapons fall. And they were, they're pretty bleak, really. And we have very crazy people doing very, very crazy things. And we have diseases across the world in days. And we have all this disturbance. And so I've got to be a bit loose with my plans and expectations. Anyway, I know I'm going to die one day. But I've got to hold them a bit loosely. Not have too many hard and fast goals that I've invented for myself to aim for at the blinkering of everything else. These sort of things are, in fact, I think, if we're correctly positioned and flexible and free in God, are very good things, surprisingly. I think of the apostles who were in prison, and there was an earthquake, and it set them free. And I think that these sort of things can set us free, because we start realising what's of value and what isn't. A man I knew, I didn't know him, but I heard him speaking working in the disaster refugees area, and he said, when all you have is Jesus, then all you need was Jesus. And again, I'm sorry, I've come, and these are the questions I'm throwing to myself. What am I doing? What am I doing in this age? Even it was just going to carry on. And the world has a way of coming to you. You know, for example, how the Vikings became Christian. They were only just over the water from the most extraordinary monasteries in the world. Lindisfarne and the Irish monastery, great places of extraordinary learning and prayer, fasting, on a very Christian country. And no one went to them, so they came to us. And they disturbed the whole thing. And they took back slaves and wives and things who were Christian. And that's how they got evangelized. It wasn't how people planned. And I think the world will come to us. The world has come to Bristol. The world is on our doorstep. And it comes down, this is what I'm saying to myself, it comes down to me understanding my identity, who I am, why I'm here, and not constricting myself with mediocre expectations. Because all I do is restrict God in my life. And everyone is extraordinary, or else God's not extraordinary. And if we're not being extraordinary, all we need to do is divest ourselves of those things which don't matter. And so outward looking is missions. It is that. But outward looking is your own outward looking. And if it's a very small funnel, I suggest you have much more you can see. 360 behind yourself. Climb out the window. It's being rapped at. Someone's tapping at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for just sharing where you're at, and so openly and honestly, rawly. And we appreciate that, you've come from that to this, and that's amazing that you just pulled those thoughts together, and it's really challenging, actually. I mean, I don't think anyone in the room is not challenged right now to kind of pay attention to your life and to what you're thinking about and how you're processing your life, what you're aiming for, what you're dreaming for, what your position is in the world that you're in. So, it's good to pay attention. I just had a picture of you as you were talking with an old pocket watch. I bet you've got one, actually. No, I just saw you sort of opening it and opening the inner workings. Those kind of old ones on a chain, and just carefully paying attention to the workings of the clock and making it work smoothly. I just felt like God saying that you're a bit of a timekeeper. And, you're somebody who pays attention to the times that we're in, but also keeps time and calls people into a place of keeping time. And it's something that, maybe what Lewis was saying, that sort of who are you to the world? And I just felt God really blessing you in that, and just affirming you in that sort of attentiveness that you've got, thoughtful attentiveness. It's really wonderful. So thank you so much. It's a gift to us. And we're going to pray in a minute, but did you want to share something?